Hello, you're listening to part of this Preview Season 2, Episode 15. I'm Josh Gaffney, and today I'm joined by Graham Wilson from Beyond the Waves as we look against the game against Spartak Moscow. So we've just came off a disappointing 1-1 draw against Arbroath in the Scottish Cup, but on this Wednesday we've got a big game to look forward to, Spartak Moscow. Graham Wilson?
Yeah, disappointing result over the weekend, 1-1, but there were some positives to take out of that tie. First off, we had far more attempts on goal and shots on target than we've had in previous weeks, and hopefully we can build upon that. And if you're creating the chances and if you have enough shots on goal, eventually we're going to find the back of the net. It's just trying to find that cutting edge that we've been lacking over the past several weeks, and no better opportunity than this tie coming up against Spartak. Obviously, we had some joy in Moscow and the first tie against the Russian side, and it's all to play for in this tie. As long as we can exceed the result that Benfica has away to Barcelona, obviously a tall order for them, to say the least, we should see our way through into the knockout stages of the Champions League once again. Josh, let me ask you, what are some of the lineup decisions that are going to be crucial for this tie? We're getting some players who are coming back from injury who may not have been available for that first tie against Spartak, and conversely, we have a couple of players who aren't going to be available for this tie, but so much in terms of a positive nature to look at from that first tie. Is this going to be a carbon copy from Neil Lennon this time to try and replicate the result?
I'm looking at the squad and the way that we need to approach this game. I think it's really a must-win game. Because if Benfica, manage to get a draw away at Barcelona, however unlikely it is, I'd still like to get the win. To give us the best chance we can possibly get to get into the last 16. So really, to get a win, we need to score a goal. I think we'll probably need to score 2 to keep it nice and safe. So I think we're going to need to go out and attack them. When we played Benfica at home, I didn't really feel that the way we set up was very attacking. It was kind of a more holding formation. It felt more like a 4-5-1 with Miku up front, who isn't really, he's not really a kind of goal scorer type of player.
You're right.
So I think this time I'd like to play something like a 4-2-3-1, similar to the formation we played away against Spartak Moscow. That seemed to have a lot of success. It gave us a good width and a decent strength in the middle on the defence. We've got a few weaknesses. Obviously, Brown, he's had his recurrent injury. And a player that I think we're missing right now is Aguirre at left back. I know he's not everyone's favourite player. He's not performed up to the same standard that he did when he first joined Celtic, but I still think, even at 50% or so, he's still a really valuable player at left back. Just brings a lot of energy to that side of the pitch.
You're absolutely right, Josh. Emilio Aguirre and his absence, it's no coincidence that Celtic has gone through a bit of a rough patch while he's been out, and it's absolutely crucial that we get him back as soon as possible and get him back to playing at full form, at top form rather. That's really the question at this point: is which Aguirre is going to show up? Is it going to be the Aguirre that's fully fit, that can make those bombing runs up the left flank and provide some decent service into the box for Gary Hooper? That's going to be vital. Gary Hooper, over the past several weeks has not been his usual productive self. His supply lines haven't really been as consistent and fruitful as maybe they have been in the past. Gary Hooper is the type of striker that relies heavily on having service, making sure that supply line stays open, good opportunities. He'll put them away, but he cannot create his own chances. Aguirre, came on as a substitute in the second half of that Arbroath tie that unfortunately didn't turn our way, and he looked very ineffective, and that's to be expected for a player that's missed so much time. But nonetheless, it's a question mark as to whether or not he's going to be fully fit and ready to come back and start in this tie. Now, speaking about the formation, what you brought up there, 4-2-3-1, what we played away in Moscow that got us the result on the first leg, against the Russians. Now, some folks may listen to this and say, why are we going to play with one striker at home? But the 4-2-3-1 can and does have a tendency to be a very attacking side, especially when you're playing with a player like Georgios Samaras up the left-hand side. Now, obviously we want to make sure that Sammy stays on that left-hand side, doesn't drift more centrally, get us back to goal, and then obviously we know what's going to happen. He gets dispossessed. It breaks down any sort of attacking opportunity we have. But if we can provide outballs for him to run onto, that's going to ask loads of questions for the opposing right back as well as their center halves. I think the key component to this, and sort of a symbiotic relationship, is Scott Brown. You mentioned he hasn't been fully fit for months, and it's a miracle that he's even active or available for this tie. What we're going to need to do is put him in a role where he can have a lot of effectiveness without having to do a lot of that dogged running all over the middle of the park. And I think where he played against Spartak the first time around, just behind Gary Hooper, I think is the ideal situation. Does two things. He can be very effective while not having to exert himself too much. But secondly, he's not going to give up that middle of the park. So that's going to keep Sammy glued to that left-hand side. He's not going to allow Sammy to drift centrally. And he can provide that outball for Sammy to run onto and hopefully stretch the defense and open up opportunities for a late advancing midfielder. We're going to need to create as many chances as we can in as many different ways as we possibly can. Now, obviously, Scott Brown not being 100% fit, bit of a question mark as to how long he can even play. But we have the opportunity to rotate him with Chris Commons as we did, again, against Moscow. Chris Commons does quite well in that central role as well, because he can open up space for himself to take advantage of just an absolutely rocket, powerful left foot of his, and once again create another chance or another opportunity to score goals. So 4-2-3-1, yes, it does seem a bit more rigid, a bit more, I guess, withholding, especially for a home leg, a home tie, but there's a lot of attacking potential in that lineup, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, there is. I think the thing that just unlocks it is having a central attacking midfielder. Just something to really sit in the middle behind two holding midfielders, and you've also got your two wingers as well. So you've got an attacking threat in the middle that can bring the ball up from deep, and you've got two wingers who are obviously going to stretch the field of play. So as long as the central attacking midfielder works well with the wingers and the striker, it can be very attacking with A4 players, just bouncing the ball each other. And also it's solid in defence. The only potential problem I can see is that in this, unlike in the away leg, we don't have James Forrest this time. And I think when he played against Spartak Moscow, he was very effective at stretching the field of play, especially when Spartak went down to 10 men. So I'm not sure how a 4-2-3-1 would adapt without James Forrest, but you have got players who can come on and play out wide, like Dylan Georg, Tony Watt, he can play out wide sometimes. So there's some players that could maybe come on and replace Scott Brown or Chris Commons, if they're feeling a bit heavy in the legs.
I agree completely, and the substitutes and how they're going to be used and what time they're going to be used and for who they're going to be used, that's going to be an absolutely vital aspect of this tie and the result. Especially considering Scott Brown, it's likely is not going to make it 90 minutes. If we need to adjust tactically, if we need to, even if we're having success, but we need to do a like for like, we do have options. Like you said, Dylan McGeoch is a fantastic resource to bring off the bench, and then Lasad seems to be playing himself into some bit of form at this point. Obviously, those are good resources to have at our disposal. So that's going to be an absolutely vital aspect of this tie. Now, talking about this Spartak side, they've gone up against some tough times, a rough stretch, if you will, over the past couple of weeks. They I've seen their manager get sacked, Unai Emery, who I have a lot of respect for, but just couldn't quite make it work in terms of getting results in the Russian league and in the Champions League alike. And combination with that, they had a rather rough go of it last week in their own domestic league against Zenit. Let's be honest, Zenit are a fantastic side in their own right. Nonetheless, Spartak looked incredibly toothless during that tie. Seemed a bit listless, without ideas, and they're also missing Aiden McGeady. They do have several crucial injuries coming into this tie, so they're not really at 100%. Either mentally or physically. That's an opportunity for Celtic, but we need to be absolutely, completely sharp. We mentioned Izagiri. He's a bit of a question mark. where do you see some of the players lining up in this 4-2-3-1 that we've imagined here? I mean, do you see maybe a situation where Charlie Mulgrew would line up in that holding midfielder role as he did in Moscow? Or, we've seen Barham Kyle as well as Joe Ledley come back and play their way back into form and fitness. Could this be a situation where with an ailing Izagiri, maybe out of form Izagiri over on the left-hand side, Charlie Mulgrew goes over to left back, and you see Kyle and Ledley at the holding midfield? What are your thoughts there?
I think that Victor Wanyama's also a big miss for this game as well. I think he was really effective in his role at the away game.
Definitely.
But, we've got good replacements. We've got Kyle, who's come back into form, the reliable Joe Ledley, and also Charlie Mulgrew, who can play in the middle there. I'm not sure if Izagiri will be fit enough for the Spartak Moscow game. So it's a question of who do you put at left back here. You can either put Charlie Mulgrew at left back or Matthews. I'm not 100% sure with Matthews at left back. It can be good on defence when he's focusing on his defence game. But the fact is, when you're playing at left back, you have to attack as well. And at the Barcelona game, I thought that Matthews played very well because he didn't have to really go forward that much. But in the domestic games when he's played at left back, where he's been caught.
Yeah, he does seem to get a bit stuck up the park. When he does have, like you mentioned in the SPL, when he does have more of an attacking role to play and a more attacking responsibility, sometimes he can get caught out positionally and finds it hard to track back. That can be a liability, especially going up against a side like Spartak. Even if they are missing McGeady, they have plenty of firepower to make you pay.
Yeah, but the benefit of having Charlie Mulgrew in the middle is obviously he's skill on the ball, long balls, medium balls, is very good. And also he gives a bit of a physical presence there, which Kyle doesn't really have. Joe Ledley is quite physical, but I think Charlie Mulgrew is a bit more physical, and Spartak Moscow, they are quite physical in the middle as well. They've got Kim Kallstrom, a midfielder I really respect. He's played over 50 games in the Champions League, he's really experienced. So whoever Neil Lennon picks in the middle against Spartak Moscow, it's got to be really important.
Agree completely. Now I'm going to go through my starting 11 here and how I see it positionally lining up. I think we both agree a 4-2-3-1 would be reasonable in terms of the lineup, in terms of going out and attacking. We need to absolutely make sure that we attack and not get bogged down into a similar mentality and a similar formation as we did against Benfica in our first Champions League tie that you alluded to earlier, and they'll know that's just not going to be good enough, I'm afraid. So we absolutely need to make sure that we're going out there to try and get goals, and I think that we can accomplish that. Now, obviously, Fraser Forster, he's on every the first name on the team sheet each and every week. Michael Lustig has gone above and beyond, meriting and warranting a starting place at right back, both in the SPL and in the Champions League itself. Fantastic form so far this season. Continues over the central defense. Ambrose and Wilson, they've formed a fantastic partnership. I'm going to go with Matthews. And the reason being, yes, as we highlighted, as you pointed out very succinctly, Adam Matthews does have a likelihood to get stuck up the park, but we're really going to need an attacking force. We're going to need wave after wave of maintaining possession and not just having the ball and passing sideways, but looking up the park. We need to have our first instinct, looking up the park, seeking out a player up the pitch so that we can facilitate service to our strikers, most notably Gary Hooper. So Adam Matthews on the left-hand side. Obviously, Charlie Mulgrew for his set pieces and his ability to deliver the ball into the box. Plus, he's found himself on the end of in-swinging corners more often than not, and in really key places. So his presence is absolutely vital. Charlie Mulgrew, I'd like to see him as a holding midfielder alongside Joe Ledley. Obviously, two left-footed holding midfielders, that potentially could create a problem, but I think Joe Ledley is versatile enough to be able to cover enough ground. Now, in a 4-2-3-1, as we're laying out here, especially with Scott Brown being that sort of tip of the spear, not really tip of the spear, but playing just behind Gary Hooper, that can easily convert into a 4-3-3 with Brown dropping back. So we have plenty of cover, and obviously Brown likes to roam a bit. So I think that can be sort of covered by his presence there. Brown, obviously, as I mentioned, in the center there. Commons on the right-hand side, not my favorite position for him. I don't think he's as effective as he possibly can be. But again, switching back and forth with Scott Brown, I think he has the opportunity to get in there, make those slashing runs and create and help out Gary Hooper and provide opportunities for him. And as we mentioned before, Georgios Samaras on the left-hand side. But we have to facilitate those out balls for him to run onto because that's where he's most dangerous. If we start seeing Samaras with his back to goal and relying too much on him flicking the ball on through the air, we're going to have problems. Gary Hooper hasn't been on the best of form as of late, but with a striker of his quality, it's only a matter of time before he plays himself back into form, gets that confidence going, and once it clicks, there's nobody more dangerous in the box, and that includes the entirety of Britain. So there's my starting 11. What are your thoughts, Josh?
The only change I'd make from that side is I'm going to go for Mulgrew at left back. I'm just not 100% sure about Matthews at left back, and the last thing I want in this game is just a lack of concentration at the back leading to Spartak Moscow getting a cheap goal or two. So Charlie Mulgrew, just a safe option at left back, and then in the defensive midfield positions, Ledley and Kyle. If things are getting really, really bad in the middle of the park, then we do have the option of just moving Charlie Mulgrew into the middle. And Joe Ledley, he can play left back, or he can bring on Adam Matthews or Azagiwe. If he's 50% fit, he could come on for the second half or so on. So that's the only change I'd make from your side. I'd put Mulgrew at left back.
Time to call the score. What are your thoughts there? Scoreline.
It's a tough one. I'm going to say we're going to keep a clean sheet, and it's going to be a 2-0.
Nice one. Margin of victory is the same for me, but I'm not sure we can keep a clean sheet. There's so much firepower coming from this Moscow side, even without McGeady. They have a couple of attacking midfield players who are a question mark in terms of their fitness, but they do obviously have Ari. He's going to be fit. He's running his mouth in the media like we knew he would, and so I'm going to say 3-1 to Celtic. I think it's high time that Gary Hooper regains that confidence, that form. We're always very dangerous from set pieces. I don't think this game is going to be any different, but 3-1 for me. We progress on into the knockout stages of the Champions League and push on from there.
Good stuff. Hail, hail, and keep the faith.